Story number 5. The Haunting Secret in Chloe's Closet. It was a chilly November evening in the small town of Willowsburg. The air was crisp, and the rustling of dry leaves outside filled the silence. Mike had just returned from his late shift at the auto repair shop, exhausted but happy to be home. His wife, Leah, had already gone to bed, and their 8-year-old daughter, Chloe, was presumably fast asleep in her room. Mike set his lunchbox down and tiptoed through the house, careful not to wake anyone. He pushed open Chloe's door to check on her, as he did every night. She lay under her rainbow-patterned blanket, her chest rising and falling with the rhythm of sleep. A soft smile touched his lips. He turned to leave, but paused when he heard a faint, almost imperceptible sound coming from the closet. It was a rustling, like fabric brushing against something solid. His heart tightened. The town had been buzzing lately with stories of break-ins, and he couldn't shake the sense that something was very wrong. He closed Chloe's door softly behind him and hurried to the kitchen, where he grabbed the old baseball bat he kept in the pantry. He returned to Chloe's room, his pulse thundering in his ears. Steeling himself, he slowly approached the closet. The door was ajar, a small crack of darkness spilling out. Taking a deep breath, Mike gripped the bat tightly and swung the door open with a loud bang. He barely had time to react. 2 figures burst from the closet, clad in all black, with ski masks covering their faces. The intruders moved fast, but so did Mike. He swung the bat wildly, catching one of them in the shoulder. The other lunged at him, and they tumbled to the floor, locked in a desperate struggle. Chloe woke up, her terrified screams piercing through the chaos. "Leah, call the police," Mike roared, adrenaline surging through him as he managed to push one of the intruders off. Leah, jolted awake, scrambled to grab her phone and call for help. The second man tried to escape, but Mike swung the bat again, forcing him to stumble back. Just then, the wail of approaching sirens filled the air, and the intruders made a break for the window, vanishing into the night. Moments later, the police arrived, taking statements and searching the area. They found no trace of the men, except for muddy footprints leading away from the house. The officers reassured Mike and Leah they'd patrol the neighborhood, but the fear lingered, an oppressive weight that refused to lift. As the police were about to leave, one officer approached Mike. "We've seen a pattern with these break-ins," he said grimly. "They're not just stealing. They seem to be targeting families, watching them for days, figuring out their routines." A cold shiver ran down Mike's spine. These weren't just intruders looking for valuables. They were predators who had studied his family. Chloe's closet, her safe haven full of toys and dresses, had been invaded by darkness and danger. That night, as Mike held his daughter close, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The shadows seemed deeper, the house quieter. Every creak and groan of the old wooden floors kept him on edge, haunted by the thought that those men had planned something far more sinister than a simple robbery. From that day on, he never took their safety for granted, reinforcing locks and installing cameras. Yet, no matter how secure their house became, the memory of that night lingered, an unsettling reminder that sometimes the greatest threats come from the places we least expect. Story number 6. The Night We Brought the Haunt Home. It was a crisp autumn night in the city of Crestfall, known for its historic buildings and the annual Fear Manor haunted house event that drew thrill seekers from miles around. Jason, Leah, Mateo, and Annika, four friends with a taste for the supernatural, had eagerly anticipated this night. Fear Manor was infamous, rumored to be one of the most terrifying haunted attractions in the region, and the group couldn't wait to test their courage. Laughter echoed as they entered the sprawling Victorian mansion-turned-haunted house. Dim lighting, eerie fog, and unsettling whispers made their hair stand on end. Annika, always the skeptic, scoffed at the jump scares, but Jason and Mateo weren't too proud to admit they'd flinched more than once. Leah clung to her boyfriend, Jason, nervously eyeing each creaking door and shadowy corner. "Come on, you guys," Annika teased as they reached the final room, an elaborately staged Victorian parlor filled with dusty antiques and a ghastly mannequin dressed as a masked undertaker. "It's all fake." Just as she said that, the mannequin sprang to life, letting out a guttural roar. The friends screamed, stumbling backward in a mix of terror and laughter. But as they left the haunted house, another figure, a tall man with a black mask, pale clothing, and a wide-brimmed hat, seemed to melt out of the shadows behind them. "Clever addition," Mateo said, snapping a photo with his phone. The man didn't respond, only standing perfectly still, his eyes hidden behind the mask's dark lenses. Shaking off the unease, the group made their way to Jason's car, parked under a flickering streetlight. They drove off, joking about their experience and debating which part had been the scariest. It wasn't until they reached Leah's house that things took a darker turn. As Leah stepped out of the car, her voice wavered. "Hey, Jason, did anyone else see that?" she asked, pointing toward the far end of the quiet cul-de-sac. There, bathed in the amber glow of the street lamp, was the same masked man from Fear Manor, standing unnaturally still. Jason forced a laugh. "It's probably one of the actors trying to freak us out," he reasoned. But his smile didn't reach his eyes, and the fear bubbling up inside him felt real. The group hurried into Leah's house, locking the doors and closing the blinds. They gathered in the living room, attempting to shake off the encounter. Annika checked her phone, browsing the photos they had taken earlier. Her hand trembled when she zoomed in on one picture. Behind them, barely visible in the misty background, was the masked man. He had followed them from the haunted house. Mateo grabbed a kitchen knife, his usual bravado stripped away by the encroaching dread. "Let's just wait it out," he suggested, his voice cracking. Minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. Suddenly, a loud bang erupted from the back door, as though someone, or something, was trying to force it open. The friends huddled together, hearts racing. Jason called the police, whispering the situation as quietly as he could. Then, the banging stopped. Silence enveloped the house. But before relief could set in, they heard a slow, deliberate scraping sound coming from the upstairs hallway. Leah stifled a sob. The intruder wasn't at the door anymore. He was inside. Sirens pierced the night air, and the flashing red and blue lights flooded the front yard. The friends bolted for the door as police officers stormed inside. The officers searched every room, but found no trace of the masked man. The only clue left behind was a dusty black hat lying in the center of Leah's bedroom floor. To this day, none of them visit Fear Manor, and they never forget the lesson that still haunts their nightmares. Sometimes, when you chase fear for fun, it might decide to follow you home. Story number 7, The Nightmare House. Our new home came with a terrifying secret. When the Rivera family first moved into their charming, two-story home in the quiet town of Willow Springs, it seemed like a dream come true. The house had everything: a sprawling backyard, a cozy fireplace, and a neighborhood full of friendly faces. Diego and Carmen Rivera, along with their two children, Eva and little Lucas, were excited to settle into their new life. But their dream quickly turned into a nightmare. It started on their very first night. Ava, a teenager with a love for all things supernatural, brushed off the faint tapping noises she heard outside her bedroom window. It's probably just the wind, she reassured herself, curling deeper into her blankets. But the wind couldn't explain the sound of footsteps on the front porch, slow, deliberate, and haunting. The next morning, Carmen noticed something strange. The welcome mat was flipped upside down, and muddy footprints trailed from the porch steps to the front door. Must have been some pranksters, Diego muttered, dismissing it as harmless mischief. Still, he couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. As the days went by, the late night disturbances only worsened. Every evening, at precisely 11:11 p.m., a loud, rhythmic knock echoed through the house, always coming from the front door. When Diego or Carmen would peek through the peephole, no one was there. Ava, curious and fearless, recorded the sounds on her phone and even tried staying up to catch the culprit. But all she captured was an empty street under the eerie glow of the street lamps. Things escalated one stormy night when Lucas, only 6 years old, ran into his parents' room, crying. "There's a man outside my window," he sobbed, his small body trembling. Diego rushed to the boy's room, but again, there was nothing, just sheets of rain pelting the glass and the rustling of tree branches. Carmen tried to soothe Lucas, but his words left a chill in the room. He said he was waiting for us. Diego finally decided to install security cameras around the house. That night, as the clock struck 11:11, the familiar knocking began. Diego watched the footage on his phone, his hands trembling. The cameras showed something impossible, the door knocker moving up and down, yet no one was standing in front of it. Frustrated and terrified, the Riveras called a local handyman to inspect the property. The man, a lifelong resident of Willow Springs, grew pale as they described the occurrences. "This house," he whispered, "it used to belong to the Grays. They vanished one night, years ago. No one knows what happened, but folks around here say the spirits come back, looking for new owners." That evening, Eva did some digging online and uncovered old newspaper clippings. The Grays had indeed disappeared under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind unanswered questions and rumors of a cursed house. Ava's curiosity was replaced with a deep, paralyzing fear. On their final night in the house, the knocking grew violent, shaking the front door on its hinges. The family huddled together, their packed suitcases ready by the door. Suddenly, the front door swung open, and a cold gust of wind blew through the house. Diego grabbed a flashlight and pointed it into the darkness. But all he saw were two shadowy figures at the edge of the yard, standing impossibly still. The Riveras didn't wait to see what happened next. They piled into their car and sped away, leaving the nightmare house behind. The next day, as the sun rose over Willow Springs, a new family pulled into the driveway, marveling at their new home. The Riveras knew they couldn't stop them, but they whispered a silent prayer that this time the house's secrets would remain buried. And if anyone ever hears a knock at 11:11 p.m., they'll know to leave before it's too late. Story number 8, Haunted House Horror. The masked figure that followed us home. It was supposed to be a night full of scares and laughter. Madison, her best friend Lexi, and Lexi's boyfriend Jake had planned their Halloween evening down to the last detail, hit the haunted house attraction on the outskirts of town, then grab late night pizza and binge horror movies at Lexi's place, dressed in costumes, a witch, a vampire, and a zombie. They were ready to embrace the thrill. The haunted house was notorious for being the most terrifying in the city, attracting adrenaline junkies and horror enthusiasts alike. As the trio stepped inside, they were greeted by flashing strobe lights, walls dripping with fake blood, and actors jumping out from every shadow. Madison was on edge, but loved the rush. She screamed, laughed, and clung to Lexi as they moved through the maze of horrors. Toward the end of the attraction, they entered a pitch black room where they had to navigate by touch. It was disorienting, and every step felt uncertain. Suddenly, a masked actor appeared, standing mere inches from Madison. The mask was unnervingly realistic, resembling a pale, expressionless face with hollow eyes. Madison let out a genuine scream as the figure tilted its head, not saying a word. The eerie silence was unsettling, and even after the group rushed out of the room, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Once they emerged from the haunted house, they laughed off the experience, teasing each other about who screamed the loudest. That mask guy got you good, Mads, Jake joked, nudging her. Madison forced a laugh, trying to brush off the unease that clung to her like a shadow. They made their way to Lexi's car, the parking lot almost empty now, and started driving home. Madison glanced out the back window and froze. Guys, she said, her voice trembling. I think someone's following us. Lexi checked the rearview mirror, but the street behind them appeared empty. Jake shrugged. Relax. It's just your imagination. But Madison couldn't relax. When they stopped at a red light, she spotted him, the same masked figure from the haunted house, standing under a flickering streetlight. His head was tilted just as before, and he was staring straight at them. Madison's heart pounded in her chest. Look, she whispered. But as Lexi turned to see, the figure had vanished. Back at Lexi's house, they tried to shake off the paranoia. Madison was jittery, double-checking the locks on every door. Jake made fun of her. You're letting that actor get to you, Mads. But deep down, Madison knew this wasn't just a lingering scare. Something felt wrong. As they settled on the couch for their movie marathon, the sense of unease only grew. Halfway through their first film, a loud knock echoed from the front door. Everyone went silent. The movie's jump scare suddenly irrelevant. Probably just trick-or-treaters, Lexi reasoned. Though it was well past midnight, Jake got up to answer the door. But when he opened it, no one was there. The three friends exchanged nervous glances, a cold dread settling over the room. Madison peeked through the window, her breath catching in her throat. Standing at the end of the driveway, barely visible in the glow of the street lamp, was the masked figure. This time, he took a step forward. Panicked, they called the police, who arrived quickly, but found no sign of the stalker. The officers assured them it was probably a Halloween prank, but Madison wasn't convinced. The figure's haunting, silent presence felt too real, too personal. That night, Madison barely slept, and the next morning, she found muddy footprints leading up to her bedroom window. The mask's empty eyes haunted her dreams for weeks, and the three friends never went back to that haunted house attraction. To this day, Madison wonders if the masked figure ever stopped watching or if he's just waiting for the perfect moment to return. Make sure to subscribe for more terrifying stories and hit the bell icon to never miss an update. Don't forget to like, comment, and share these stories with your friends to keep the spooky spirit alive.